All right, from the city of Fairfax City, we are very grateful that David Becker accepted our invitation. David, welcome to my humble podcast, my friend.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Claudio.
Oh, no problem. David, let's go back to the beginning of your life. Were you born in a musical family? How were you when you perhaps began taking, I don't know, guitar lesson, piano lesson, like all the kids here?
Well, yeah, my family's musical in the sense that my mother, she's European, she's Dutch, and she was born in the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia. And her Dutch family, also her mother was German. The German family was musical. They played piano with Clara Schumann and were in that scene. So there was that element that my mom grew up with that. She never took piano lessons. She played by ear. Everybody else in her family studied piano, but she could hear music and she could play, and she had good pitch. And my father wasn't really a musician, but he was a magician, but he liked music, and he also had good pitch and good rhythm. So the three of us, I'm the youngest of three boys, and my oldest brother Ed, he's about 6.5 years older than me. He was listening to all kinds of music, Led Zeppelin and the Moody Blues and everything you can imagine, Jimi Hendrix, and of course we were collecting Monkey records and buying 45s of the day. And my father took us to see Help when I was 4 years old at a drive-in. So there was just music around the house. My parents had a huge classical collection. One of the first records that I remember as a kid listening to regularly was Edvard Grieg's Concerto in A minor. And I would conduct with a little stick in front of the stereo. So I wanted to be a drummer. And from the age of like 2 or 3, I got a drum every year. And I could sort of play, and my brother Ed played classical piano. And my brother Bruce kind of, played a little guitar for a little bit. But then at some point we switched and he took over playing drums and I took up the trumpet. So I had a really good musical education in the junior high school with a musician, Ted Dector, who... His son, Brad, is an arranger in Los Angeles, and his grandson, Graham, is an aspiring jazz guitar player. He's played with many, many, many people, the Clayton Hamilton Orchestra, Michael Bublé. And he instilled a lot of great things in all of us as children, how to be a band member. And in that program that I went through, many, many of my contemporaries, like drummer Mark Schulman, who played with Pink and Foreigner, we all had that experience, and it was a really great experience, and that led me to playing guitar, which I started at age 15, and then that's how I started to, investigate the idea of a career. It was interesting because as a kid, I always thought I was going to be an airline pilot because I traveled a lot to Europe because of the European family. But when I was 15, I had a guitar teacher, and he looked at me and he said, you're going to make music for your living, for your life. And without thinking, I just said, yeah, okay. And that was it. I never looked back. And everything I did from that moment on was to somehow, conceive the idea of being a musician and making my living from it.
I got you. Were you in any bands in high school?
Yeah, in high school I played with my brothers. We had cover bands, and we played, dances and parties, and I played in the jazz band in junior high school, and we did performances at the school for the parents, and we even made recordings that they made records out of. I had a chance to play lots of gigs, actually, from the time I was about 14 with trumpet and then eventually on guitar. And that was a great experience because I learned, how to be a band member in the school, and then when we would go out and play in, if it was a dance or whatever, we would really learn the music and try to present it, not to be virtuosos, but to make the music be the focal point. And that's always been my intention. And then I always liked to write music. And so from very early on, I would make up songs on the piano, on the trumpet, and then eventually on guitar. And that's what led me to, form what became the David Becker Tribune, which was basically the idea of me composing my own music that I could play with my brother on drums and present in a trio. Because I like the idea of a guitar, bass, and drum trio. But I didn't want to just play standards. I mean, I love standards. I learned a lot from it. But composing was very instrumental early on for me, and still to this day. I'm very fortunate that I've released close to 200 pieces of music. And I'm always, grateful that I had the opportunity to document that. Because I know a lot of my contemporaries and didn't have the opportunity to have a label to record that, and I feel very lucky that that stuff is floating around. So
Good for you. Good for you. So you finished high school. Any pressure for your family about, hey, forget about music, you're not going to make any money. Go to school, become a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or leave the music as hobby, or you were free to
no,
choose?
I mean, I have a weird life because as a child, when I was 10, I started doing acting on television. So by the time I was 15, I had worked on like, I don't know, 10 or 15 major national TV commercials, which a lot of people still know. There's a couple on YouTube, and I got to work with Eddie Albert, great actor, and play him as a kid. And then I also got to work with Patrick Duffy. I did a lot of Disney auditions and things like that. So I was already in the business as a kid, and I think my parents sort of knew that I had interest to do something other than be conventional. So they never really said, you have to do this or do that. So when I graduated high school, I wanted to go to Berklee College of Music. That was the place that I thought I would go. And through a couple of meetings with guitar players that had gone to GIT, which was a brand new school, I decided to go there. But my parents never said, you can't do that. They just said, we trust you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do, and we support you. So I was very lucky in that regard. And also my mom, to her credit, you know, she allowed us to rehearse at the house. I mean, most of my friends, when we had a band, it was like, you know, you had to rehearse in the garage. She would let us play in the bedrooms, you know, and she would be downstairs listening. So I think, you know, they were always there for the concerts at the schools, you know, in the high school and junior high. They were always in the band boosters and supported us. So I think it was just a natural evolution. I'm sure they had reservations about, you know, what's my kid going to do? How is he going to make a living? But I think that sort of fell by the wayside when they saw that I was serious about it and that I really had a lot of conviction to do it. So
Good for you, man. Good for you. So you and your brother formed the band David Becker Tribute in 1982, right? And in 84, you recorded a self-titled EP that was released at the time at Warner Brothers and touring in Europe. That's a big deal, man, for a young guy.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we didn't, you know, in those days there was no social media, so we had to do everything ourselves. We were lucky because, you know, when we put the band together, I wanted to do gigs. So we started to play around Los Angeles, and there was one club that I really wanted to play at because that was the place for contemporary jazz or whatever, and a lot of other music. And we finally got a gig there, and it was horrible. I mean, it was like, you know, my brother wanted to quit, and, you know, but I was like, no, we got to keep doing this. And I gave a tape to a guy that had a place in Venice Beach called the Comeback Inn. And it was a really cool place because, you know, Milcho Leviev played there, Charlie Hayden played there, Joe DiOrio, Pat Metheny even played there. I think the band Arco Iris would play there regularly. So, and they were encouraging people to do original music. They didn't want you to do covers. And it was run by a German guy. And I had been to Germany anyway, kind of shopping my music and trying to get a record deal, and had encouragement from guys from ECM and ECM Records. So when I got him the tape, he called me up like literally the day or the couple days after that disaster gig and said, I love your music and I'd love for you to play. Can you come next week? And we're doing this you know, big festival. Can you play for that? And I said, sure. And then we ended up becoming like a regular, you know, once or twice a month at that place. And we got to really hone our skills. And that was what led me to want to go on the road, was that he said, I've got some other artists and I want to go to Germany and bring a bunch of them over there. Well, at the same time we were doing that, we met a guy that was a producer at Warner Brothers, and he had just happened to stumble in one night and he saw us play and he's like, I want to record you guys. I think this is great. So he did a 5-song EP, and that became, it wasn't released by Warner's, but it was on their label to be able to use as radio distribution. So we took it to Europe. We did a tour there. We went all over the States, and it was great. And I also had the support of the Martin Guitar Company, because at the same time that we were playing, our original bass player, Matthew McFadden, was good friends with Chris Martin, who was C.F. Martin IV, who now is the head of Martin Guitars. At the time, he was working for the company, but he had a lot of people that were not supportive of what he wanted to do because he was a young Martin. But he saw in me something that he really liked, and I would go and play whatever that I would do on the guitar, and he would do these workshops, and we would go all over the world. And that got me into an ad in 1984 with Steve Howe of Yes and of Asia. So there's an ad with me and Steve Howe. It's like Rising Star, Superstar, and I was the Rising Star. And it was in every magazine. It was in Guitar Player, it was in Musician, it was in Circus. So people knew my name. They didn't know what I sounded like, but they would, I'd run into people, oh, you're that guy in that ad. So that coupled with the EP got us on the road, and we were working pretty much, I was 22 and we did probably 50 or 60 gigs in a 4 or 5 month period in Germany, all over the States. And that's what eventually led us to be able to go in and do the full-blown recording for Long Peter Madsen, which was released a year and a half later by MCA.
Good for you, man. So you were making a decent living, a little, I suppose. You were 22, right? So
yeah, we were out on the road.
Know,
we were on the road
$300
in a
week
van.
or whatever. 500 was a lot of money. Back in the day.
We played all these colleges. We played a maintenance shop in Ames, Iowa. I live in Springfield, Illinois now. We played from here in Decatur at Millikan University, and I remember that gig. I remember doing a workshop for the guitar players. We played all over the Midwest, all over the Southwest, Northeast, the Pacific Northwest. We went to Germany, we did gigs in Berlin, in Munich, in Frankfurt, and then we came over and literally went from the East Coast all the way through the entire country and wound up in California in December of '84, and we had started in June of '84. So we really had a lot of miles and music under our belt at that point. And I mean, it's unusual for a band that, we didn't have the support of the label other than that we could use the EP as for the radio, which really helped because all those colleges had radio stations. So we could go and do interviews. And by the time we got to California, we were a well-oiled machine. So
good for you, man. And eventually you end up meeting Ken Callier, right? So he became the producer or the album?
So we did Long Peter Madsen with Chet Himes, he sadly passed away. He was the engineer and instigator of Christopher Cross's first record. He knew Christopher Cross in Texas, and he did all of his demos and helped Chris to get a record deal with Warner Brothers. And he was working at the Warner studio where he had recorded the EP, and because we hadn't gotten a distribution deal, he asked the producer, what happened to that David Becker project? And he said, well, we're still trying to get a thing. And he goes, I'd like to bring them in and record a 32-track digital full album. So we went in with Chet in the summer of '85 during, I think it was Live 8, and recorded for 5 days or something. And it took a while to get the mixes done, but that's what became Long Peter Madsen. We got signed to MCA. At the time, we got signed Jack DeJohnette, Michael Brecker, the Yellow Jackets, Larry Carlton, all were brought to that label. So it was a great stable of musicians that I was a part of, which was really wonderful. I'd never in my wildest dreams imagined getting signed to a major label. I thought I'd be working, with a small label, and I had a lot of encouragement from guys like at ECM and ENJA who actually helped me get gigs in Germany. But, somehow I got on this major label, so it was really sort of interesting. But we learned a lot. We did 2 albums. The second album, we stopped working with Chet, and we're looking for somebody to help us produce. And that we ran into Ken Calais, who had kind of distanced himself from Fleetwood Mac. And we met and we hit it off, and we did that record. We did Third Time Around with Ken, and subsequently became great friends. And, I knew his daughter Colby when she was 2. And I was, around the family a long time, and I'm still great friends with Ken. So we've over the years have worked on several projects. There was a time where we didn't work together, but he's a great guy and wonderful inspiration to me in the studio for sure.
Good for you. And Ken's daughter, Shelby, I think her name, she's very, very good.
Yeah, Colby's great. And, she used to run around when we were working in the house and scream, but she's very talented, and I got to play on some of her records. I think the second and third album I played on, and one of them was nominated for a Grammy, which I'm a part of, and it was really, really a great thing to see her kind of blossom and do her thing. So,
All right, so that was following 1991 with two albums, Third Time Around and In Motion, right?
Mhm.
What memory do you have for the period as well?
Well, when we did Third Time Around and In Motion, we were pretty much doing an album every year. We did Long Peter Madsen in '85, but it was released at the end of '86 into '87. They released the vinyl and the cassette, I think in November of '86, and then that's when CDs were new, and a lot of people said, "Are you getting a CD?" And of course, MCA said, "Yes, we're going to put that out in January of '87." So we toured our butts off. We were out there opening for everybody. I mean, opened for Miles Davis, the Yellow Jackets, Billy Cobham, George Howard. I can't even remember half the people we opened for. And we did our own gigs too. And so we were out there playing pretty much nonstop. And then we did Siberian Express at the end of '87. And that was released in '88. And we hit the road again and did, massive touring. And then at the end of that year, MCA had a takeover of the CEO, and it was unfortunate because they stopped the support of the jazz label. So all of us, myself, Michael Brecker, and everybody, were sort of like in limbo. And I was lucky that Ricky Schultz said, I know that your option is going to renew, and I'm going to give you the option to get out of it so you can go get another record label because this is not going to exist anymore for the jazz guys. And I met Jim Snowden, who was running Mesa Blue Moon, which was part of Capitol and eventually became part of Warner Brothers, who was a big supporter too. So he supported Third Time Around and In Motion. And we did then another tour after Third Time Around with our newest bass player, Tom Lilly. And all the music on that record we had played on the road. And we did that record in a little town near Santa Fe, New Mexico, in Cerrillos, which is a little town with a studio. And it was a great opportunity to work outside of LA to record. And then we hit the road again, and we were on the road for a good period of that year. So
Good for you, man. Well, were you married at the time, single? Or?
no,
Yeah,
no,
so it was a
I'm married
easier
now,
to-
and I married somebody that I met when I was a child, and we reconnected. Lori's,
All right, good for you.
I knew her in 1969, and I reconnected in 2010, and we got married in 2017. But during that time, no, I couldn't be married or have a steady girlfriend.
It's so difficult to be a musician
Yeah.
and be on the road and disappear
Yeah.
for 3 months and
I mean, I know people who do it, but at that age, I mean, from my 20s, I was so motivated to do that relationships, I mean, I tried, but it just didn't work out because
it
I
wouldn't work
knew
out.
that
Yeah.
it was more important for me to really solidify my career as a musician, and that's the time to do it. I mean, when you're young and you have the energy,
That's right. Yeah.
you have to take it, and I'm glad that I did because I mean, I'm still lucky that I'm able to go out and perform, but I'm at 22, 23, 24. I know so many guys who wish they could do that, and I was afforded the opportunity. It was a lot of work, but I just said
Yes,
I'm going to
yeah.
do this, and we did. So
Yeah. I think Pat Metheny also got married late in life at the same time.
I think so.
Like you, his music was his life,
Yeah.
If a nice lady come around, that's great, but I'm going to do my music,
Yeah.
Paul Wertico was very lucky that he was able to do both
Yes.
and marry and so on. Good for the guy, man. Of course, Batavia was released worldwide in August 6, 2020. Feel free to elaborate because that's an important album, and about regarding the atomic bomb in Japan, and
Yeah.
feel free to elaborate on that. You can do better than I do. It's
Batavia is a really personal project.
yeah.
All the records that we've done and that I've done, that has got to be probably in the top 5 or 3 for sure. Because my mother, I said she was from the Dutch East Indies, so she was interned in a Japanese concentration camp with her mother and younger brother, and her stepfather was in the government, so he was in prison. And they suffered immensely. And, the reason that I'm here now, and it's horrific what happened in World War II, but the dropping of the atomic bomb is what saved their lives. And it's horrible to have something like that have to happen. But I wanted to acknowledge the POWs from the Dutch East Indies because they never got their due. And my mother told me lots of stories. So I collected these stories over the years. And her best friend, who's the same age, they're still alive, they're 96 this year. She's living in Munich. When I was running around with my tapes, going to ECM and Enja, she was living in Munich, and I would stay with her, and she would tell me stories about that time. So I just collected them over the years, and in around 2008, I was living in Germany, and the WDR television, I got in touch with somebody who produced a television show, and they were interested in my grandmother because she was born in Cologne, and that fact that she left Germany at 16, married my grandfather who was 10 years older, went to the Dutch East Indies, and then eventually got put in a concentration camp, and then survived and came back to Europe. And so it was the very first time that I had to write down the stories. And they wanted to do a documentary and all this stuff. Long story short, the documentary fell through, but I started writing music. And that's what Batavia is. Batavia is a musical way to express those particular stories. And I actually did a 50-piece orchestra arrangement of Batavia for the Metropole Orchestra because I was going to do a concert in 2020, but because of the pandemic, that fell through. But I still have those arrangements. But if you listen to the Batavia album and you read the liner notes, you will visually see what's going on. And it's got a lot of special meaning. It was the first time that I had to tell a story that had been told. Usually when you make music, you're telling the story there from the beginning.
Yeah.
But I had to retell that story. And I think we did a very good job about it. I'm very proud of the recording. Musically, it's all over the place. There's, elements of, South American music. There's elements of Eastern European music. There's elements of jazz. There's elements of stuff from, the South. It's really hard to pigeonhole into one thing, but it's how the music just evolved. And it took me 6 or 8 months to finish that project.
Good for you, man. Have you ever thought about writing a sort of autobiography? Because you have so many stories, man.
I'm actually working on one now that tells the story of my family.
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to be easier for me to make an audio book because I have a friend who's he studied with me for a while, is Chuck Lorre, who is the producer of 2.5 Men and Big Bang Theory. He's a musician too, and he studied guitar with me for a while, and he told me, he goes, you need to write a screenplay. And I said, Chuck, I'm not a screenwriter. He goes, no, just write it. Just write it, and it'll write itself. And so I've worked on it to a certain degree, but if anybody's watching who's a screenwriter who would like to talk to me about Batavia, I'd be more than happy to speak to somebody because I think this should be told on a bigger scale. I hope to get something either on an audiobook or something written down. I have most of it composed. I just need to edit it and put it in order. So
that's good for you. Do you have the master tape and everything you have done, or nowadays I don't know if it was harder back then or it's harder now?
No, I don't. It's funny because the first releases of the David Becker Tribune are finally now available digitally. And that's Long Peter Madsen, that's Siberian Express, which was a #1 record, third time around, In Motion. Also, we released the Warner Brothers sessions this year. That's available too. And I just got word that my album Euroland is being re-released digitally now through Cool Springs Music. So the entire catalog of, I guess it's about 21 or 22 releases is all there. So from that standpoint, I'm grateful. I know that some of our masters were destroyed in the fire at Universal. So I don't know what happened there. And but the fact is that music is still available to people. That's what's important to me. So anybody watching who is a fan from years ago or now that wants to explore the catalog, please do go on all your Apple Musics and your Spotifys and your Deezers, because everything is there. Everything is available. So
there, yeah, and I will put the link for your website as well if somebody want to get a hold of you as well. I'm in the process right now, so let me tell you. So for me, it was good to do interviews. I'm in the process of visiting several record labels in London that I go often, like the Air and Abbey Road and Peter Gabriel Studio, Real World, and so forth. But for me, it became important to understand what make a great record. So that's what, when you mentioned Kinkley, I'm in the process of interviewing some record engineer to explain to me what make a great record. Also, I would like to visit if you know anybody who is the head of, I don't know, Universal MCA, that can give me a tour of the place and take picture, do a video, and I want to see where all the vaults, I don't know, like a data center where master tapes are located. For me, that it's amazing that
It is.
like you mentioned, Universal, the fire. How in the world something like that could happen?
I don't know, and you know what? I still don't know. Nobody knows really. But I was going to say about master tapes. You know, when we did the first Warner Brothers sessions, and then we did Long Peter Madsen, that studio was the Warner Brothers studio. So you know, a lot of records were recorded there, like the Doobie Brothers and all sorts of stuff. They had the master tape archives in that warehouse, and we went in there and looked at Jimi Hendrix master tapes that had the writing of the engineer on there. And I remember very vividly seeing one of the master tapes note to the mastering engineer, please do not try to fix the distortion. It's supposed to be there. Because a mastering engineer in those days would hear distortion and go like, oh, I have to fix that. But that was part of Hendrix's sound. And they didn't know, you know, and so we were very lucky to be able to see that. I also spent a lot of time when I was a recording artist for MCA, going to their warehouses and meeting the people that distributed the records and going into the, you know, meeting all the guys who did everything. So I had a good window in how it functioned. And it's interesting because even now, you know, 40 years later, I still know people that that I worked with back then that were in the record business. I mean, it's changed a lot. I don't know if those masters, where they are. I would assume that they're all digitalized, but, you know, I know Ken was able to, he did the rumors. They did that several times, and there's been several different mixes and surround sound mixes and things like that. So you know, the stuff is still there. So that's important.
Yeah, it's having the right contact who will take you. Hey, go and talk to Johnny and tell them that you're a friend of mine or whatever. You know, because that's. And the other thing is for me is I would like to know how they cut a vinyl. You know, which the process and. That's beautiful too. You know, I buy a lot of vinyl, right?
Yeah. I got to watch first 3 records we did on vinyl, and the very first album, Long Peter Madsen, was mastered at Warner Brothers by Terry Donovan, he was one of the mastering guys. I'm not sure if Terry's still around, but he did many records. And so they had that lathe, and I stood there with him while he mastered Long Peter Madsen. And then when Ken and I, when we did Siberian Express, we worked with Ken Perry, who did thousands of records, and he did a lot of the Todd Rundgren records and things like that. And he was telling me then that he was remastering stuff for CD from Bearsville Records, and to watch him work. So I got to be firsthand on those mastering sessions to watch the lathe, you know, be cut. And it was really a great experience. I mean,
absolutely.
I don't know if you guys got to do that, but I was very fortunate to be able to do that. So
man, you're a lucky guy, man. I should have wish I had known you at the time so I could have gone with you and be an observer and recording, because I like to tape stuff. And of course after that, you know, you end up releasing a new solo album called Planet in October 22, and in August 2024, you end up releasing Gravitationally Bound. Feel free to elaborate. Of course, that was the merge sound was done by Ken as well. So, and
yes.
Shelby, feel free to elaborate on these 2 records, which are very, very good actually.
So yeah, you know, in 2018, 2017, my brother did the last gig with me as the David Becker Tribune in New Zealand. We did a couple of dates down there, and he's got 2 young kids, and he just retired from touring. So I still, the DBT is still in existence, but I was using another drummer. And then I got involved with the Space Channel, which is a dedicated television channel for space. And the guy who started it, Chad Malum, is a musician. So I met him and I said, if you need any music, because at the time, a lot of my stuff was being used on the Weather Channel and all these different things. And he said, yeah, I'd love to use some of your existing music. So they did. They made some videos that they did of space, and they put stuff that was already recorded. But then in just after the pandemic hit, we were all home, and I got a phone call from him, and he said, "Could you improvise pieces for each planet in front of an audience?" And I said, "Sure," because I've been doing a lot of solo concerts, and I've been using loop pedals and expanding on what I did early on with the Martin Guitar Company. And so they flew me down to Brownsville, Texas, into a theater in, I believe it was the summer of 21 or 22. And there was no audience because of COVID, but there was a crew, and I just improvised a piece for each planet. And that became a 45-minute show that was shown numerous times on the Space Channel. And then we had the idea to do concerts. So I was going to New Zealand to do a solo tour, and I went in the studio and I recorded what I called Planets, which was some of the music that was related to that day, but not specifically those pieces of music because they were improvised. I recorded some other music, but I did the main theme to Planets, which now I do in the Planets show. And so then when I was getting ready to do another tour of New Zealand, I got a phone call from Ken saying, "David, next time you come to LA, I want you to come to our new studio, our surround sound studio, and make some music." So I went out to LA and I went up to the studio for a couple hours, and I said, "I have these pieces of music that I did for Space Channel." And he said, "Great." And his partner, Nittany Paris, her husband is an astrophysicist. So, and he works with NASA. And she got all excited about the Planets project because I showed him what it is. And so we decided to do a full album. So we did the whole album, and we did it in surround sound. So I did each part, listening to different speakers in different corners. And that's what became Gravitationally Bound. But I needed a title track. So I did all the planets, from Mercury all the way to, we included Pluto. And then I wrote the piece Gravitationally Bound, which is basically, it's a harmonic and rhythmic stagnant thing that creates this piece of music that goes in different directions harmonically and rhythmically to sort of show what the solar system does. The sun is here as this entity and the planets are moving around it. And I conceived that idea when I was in New Zealand, and that's what became the piece Gravitationally Bound. And that's been the album that was out, that I tour with when I do the Planets Project live, which I just did in Bogota. So
yeah, how often do you do the planet touring live? Like 20 gigs a year, or
I know I did I think I did maybe 12 or 13 last year, including the ones in New Zealand. I've done 2 this year. I hope to do more next year. It's just it's whenever I can get, it's an easy project to do because the videos are on a server and they just need to be uploaded, and just me. So yeah, I mean, as often as I can. It's a fun project for me to do because it's all improvised, it's all live, nothing is pre-recorded, and it's a lot of fun. So
good for you. Good for you. How difficult is it to make a living nowadays as a musician? Would you do it again? I mean, you're getting royalties for all the work you did in the past, but
yeah, it's a constant juggle of things. My career has been, like all musicians, it's been a hybrid of, recording, touring, royalties, teaching, seminars. And I love doing all of it because for me, like when I went to Bogota, the first day I did a master class for 17 guitar players. And I love that just as much as I did doing the Concert of Planets. Because for me, it's just expressing myself about what I've learned. And whether I'm performing something in a concert setting or I'm talking about music or doing this chat with you, it's the same thing. It's just interacting, getting something in return. So, I have to say that it's hard. I think the thing is for me, and I tell young people this, success is not measured by the amount of money you make or the many awards you make. To me, it's measured in completion. So if you set out to do something, like you want to write a song, write it. If you set out to do a gig, do the gig. If you set out to do a tour, do the tour. If you set out to release an album, release the album. If you set out to, whatever it is, do that. Make that your goal. Because then when you see that you've achieved it, you move on to the next goal. And these completions will keep going and lead you to somewhere else. I mean, for me, if I look at the way my career went, man, there are things that happened to me that I never thought would happen in my wildest dreams, that I hoped would happen or that I strived for. But I just kept my head to the grindstone, always saw that goal in the distance, and always when I got closer, it got further away. And that's good, because it meant that I was completing the steps that are required to do. Beyond that, it's out of our hands. So, if your goal is to make a record, make the record. If your goal is to then tour, then tour. But a lot of people get caught up in just like, I'm working on an album and I don't know, and I'm working on the song, but I can't finish it. Finish it, because the completion of something is a task that you'll give yourself the satisfaction of the idea of success. Because you succeeded at doing something. You completed a project. And that goes on. Every person, whether it's Steven Spielberg or it's, John Coltrane or whatever, their idea was first in the head, and then they went out and made it a reality. And that takes a lot of dedication.
Absolutely,
because to go from the idea to like, here it is, and a lot of people get caught up and they're like, well, no, but it didn't. No, look, you got it done. So now go on to the next thing. And hopefully things will, evolve. And you have to be willing to work hard at it. The work of you can go on YouTube and do something silly and become famous, but, really to have the longevity, you need to really be dedicated to keeping the fire of what you want to do and knowing what you want to do, because many people don't know. I talk to lots of young musicians and they're like, I don't know what I want to do. Well, then get a really clear picture, because I knew when I was 18 years old what I wanted to do. I told the head of GIT, I want to make records, I want to be a known jazz guitar player, I want to play in a trio with my brother, and I want to tour the world. And of course, for an 18-year-old kid to say that, that's pretty bold. But I knew. And he told me, he goes, I think you'll make it. But I knew when he said that it wasn't just going to be a free ride. I had to do the work. I was willing to do the work. It's just like when you want to be a musician, you have to do the work.
That's right. Yeah, it seems to me that, and applied to me with the channel too. A lot of people have very good ideas, but very few people are willing to do the work.
Exactly.
It comes down to that, And when I started the channel like 3 years ago, told me, Bob, about music, you have an accent, nobody will give you a time of your day. Now I'm keep on going, man. I'm strong.
If I believed half the people that told me you can't do that, I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
That's right.
I had people looking at me like, you can't do that. You can't. How do you do that? And they would come to me and say, how do you do that? How did you get a tour? How did you get a record deal? I'm like, because I did it. I wanted to. I'll tell you a funny story about that first tour. The guy from the Comeback Inn, he couldn't make it to Germany. So I was left alone to call all these people to book gigs for a band within a very short amount of time, which would normally be impossible. But through the luck of whatever and through the help of people like Hans Wendel, who told me, call my friend Sepp at the Unterfahrt and call this guy here. And I called them and they said, yeah, we got a gig for you, sure. And it just all kind of fell into place. I guess because I was so willing to do the work and then do the follow-up. And I think that was a valuable lesson.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if of course you did. You attended the main facility of ECM. I think it was Stuttgart at the time, Germany. I don't know if still exists. I mean, ECM record label still exists because I'm buying music. But I don't know if we're the main recording studio. Maybe they have many. I think the owner, the person who formed that, is still alive, I think.
Yeah, Manfred's still around. Yeah, I met Manfred in a lounge actually in Munich. I was flying to a gig, and I saw Manfred, and I went up and introduced myself because I was friends with John Abercrombie, and John had passed away, and I said, I'm a friend of John's, and are you a musician? He said, are you touring? And he was very curious to know. And I didn't know that I went there 40 years ago as a kid with a tape to Hans Wendel, who was his assistant or was working with him at the time. But that place was, I don't remember the address, but the original address was Gleichmannstrasse 11, I think, or 13. And I just looked it up and I went there and and Hans was very supportive. He would listen to tapes. I would send him. I'd go to Germany. I'd call him from the Hauptbahnhof and say, Hans, I got a new tape. Oh, great, man, send it to me. And he would be very honest about it and give me some great feedback. And the same with the guys from Enja. So I'm very grateful for that, but I was willing to go do that. Some kid from California who, knocked on their door and said, hey, I'm here. They were very open to at least letting me in. So I feel very lucky about that.
Good for you, man. Good for you. Well, like only take you a little bit somewhere, but not all the way, right? So you need to do the work and be good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Tuxedo Man is the name of the new album with David Becker with drummer Paul Wertico that was released on August 15, a couple very recently. And that's a collection of mostly improvised tracks or so. Man, that's a masterpiece, man.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And I had no idea. And of course, feel free to elaborate. You were living at the time in California. You moved to Illinois. And, hey, Paul, man, I'm in town. Would you like to get together for dinner? And he said, yeah, meet me in the house next Tuesday, whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of how it went down. Well, I have to just back up a little bit. So I met Paul Wertico the very first time with Pat Metheny when I was living in Belgium, in Antwerp, Belgium. I don't think Paul remembers this, but we met after a gig and we talked, and the guy that I knew who was a drum magazine head, he introduced me to Paul, and my brother was there, so they knew of each other. And then we saw each other, I think, a couple more times, at Pat's gigs. And then when he left Pat Metheny, I had done a week-long engagement with Larry Corea as a duo. And he was going on the road with Larry after that week-long thing. And so I was living in Germany, and Larry was playing very close to my house. So I went out there and I met Paul, and I think I'd met Paul also at a drum school that I was teaching at. And so we talked, and nothing, he knew who I was, and over the years, I think he was aware of what I did. So I lived in Illinois as a kid. I lived in Chicago for a year. I was born in Cincinnati, lived in Michigan. But when my wife and I sold our house in California, we wound up in Springfield, Illinois. So when we got here, I was thinking, well, Paul, I know Paul a little bit. I'm going to reach out to him and say, hey, man, I bought a house in Springfield. It's 3 hours from you. And so I called him up and he said, yeah, man. He said, we should play a gig. And I said, well, why don't we get together and just hang? He's like, yeah, come to my house. And so I drove up and I didn't bring a guitar because we just were going to hang, and we sat in his living room. I think we probably talked for, got to be about 4 hours. And he played me stuff, and I played him stuff, and we were just, it was like we knew each other our whole lives. And we discovered that there's a lot of things that we have in common musically and personally. And of course, when he was growing up in Chicago, when I lived there that year in Arlington Heights, I was 8. So Paul, he's about 8 years older than me, so he would have been a teenager. I know that area, so we could talk about that, we could talk about music. And then he said, we should make a record. And I'm like, yeah, why not? So that'd be great. And so we decided to do that, and we booked the studio time. I went back to Springfield. I had no idea what we were going to do, but I knew that I would bring all my pedals and all my stuff that I do with Planets and just see what happens. But I did have a little bit of an idea of the theme of Tuxedo Man. So I had the chords and the melody, and I kind of made a little chart. And I brought it, and said, well, we'll do this ballad. But what was really interesting, though, is the very first thing we played was The Hunt, which is the very first piece of music. And we played that. We didn't listen back. We just felt like, hey, this is really cool. And then we went on and we did Tuxedo Man. And we did a few overdubs on The Hunt, but everything was just organic. It was like we just listened and played and responded. And I felt so comfortable with Paul. We communicated on a really deep level of stuff that was just happening naturally. And it was so much fun. So the piece Tuxedo Man, I had written the melody and the chords, but when we got it in the studio, the way Paul just added some really incredible personality of something that is totally unusual to play a ballad the way that he did, but it's so Paul Wertico and so unique that it made for a lengthier piece of music that I just said, Paul, man, I have to give you half the writing credit for this because you've just made this song so much more than what I came up with. And that's pretty much how that whole thing went. Obviously, the stuff we improvised together was collectively thought of at the moment, but a piece that was already there that sort of had a little bit of a form, but he just added so much to it that it inspired so much. And I love the way that he approaches that song. I listen to it now and it's like, man, wow, it's just so deep. And it's written for our late cat, Mister, who's on the cover. He passed away just before the recording session. He was a unique cat. He was very loving cat that would just love everybody. And I just was thinking about him, and that's how that came to be. But so a lot of the pieces do follow a little bit of that. I mean, and Paul came up with some of these titles like, The Hunt and The Catch and Cicadas and Beans, which is really kind of cool because I live in a house behind a farm that farms beans, and I have cicadas in my trees. So, everything just organically came together. But I've become really close with Paul. We've become really good friends. He's a wonderful human being. He's an amazing musician, and I feel so blessed and lucky to be able to have a project with him. And I look forward to doing things live because I know we're going to do this, but we're going to just do it the two of us. I know that we can create something enormously incredible live. We can recreate some of it, not exactly note for note the way it is on the album, and I don't think we need to, but we will do something even more intense because we'll have the audience there to be the third member. And I'm looking forward to doing some live shows with them next year, for sure.
Yeah, for sure it's going to happen because I will be the first person attending the
Oh, that'd be great. Well, we got submitted for 5 Grammy nominations. So, and the Grammy ballots are out, and I've been contacting everybody I know in the Academy to say, hey, so anybody who sees this who's a voting member, please do give us your consideration. We're in 3 categories that they could vote for. There's 2 categories. One is for the best cover and one is for the liner notes. Those are by committee, but the other categories, best global music performance, best jazz performance, and best contemporary instrumental album. So those are the categories that they're in and can be voted on. So,
and then if you were to win one or more or whatever, that will open more doors for a promotion to touring again next year.
I would hope so. Yeah, I would think so. I mean, the music speaks for itself. I mean, the accolades would be wonderful. I would be, Paul and I would be elated. But I think that the record itself, it's one of the highlights for him. I know Barbara, his wife, it's her favorite all-time record that he's made.
That's right.
That's a huge compliment, of all the records he's done, all the Pat Metheny records, everything. And Paul, but see, the thing about Paul is, I told Paul, when I saw him play the first time with the Pat Metheny group, he had just joined the band, but then I saw him maybe 6 months later playing with a quartet with Pat, Charlie Hayden, and Ernie Watts. And then I really understood what he was about as a drummer. And I went, yeah. I mean, in the context of the Pat Metheny group, of course, his personality was just to support the music, and he did things very uniquely to the music. But where he was coming from, his improvisational background and all that, I got it. I understood. Wow, yeah, man. And I always hoped to play with him. I was like,
good for you, man. Good for you.
And so this all came about. I mean, it took a long time, but the manifestation.
40 years.
But that's it. That's what I said earlier. The manifestation of something comes through the idea. And the idea was planted many years ago. I didn't know in what form it would be. I didn't know how it would look or what we would do. But here we are. So,
it's good for you. And of course, the CD is out. And then I think your guys are waiting for the vinyl. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. The CD is released. It's out digitally. Unfortunately, the vinyl is there. I guess it's just with the tariffs and stuff, it's hard to get the shipments over. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it will be released on vinyl. That I do know. For those of you in Europe, you'll be able to get it. It's on a Polish label, so that will be easier to access. Tomorrow night, we're doing a live podcast on a thing called Talk Shop Live, where you can actually get a signed copy of the CD that Paul and we signed a limited number. So people, if they're watching your podcast, they can get, if they want to get a hard copy of the CD, that's the way to do that. I'm hoping that things get resolved and we have access to a lot of the orders but it's there. I mean, if you want to go explore Tuxedo Man, it's on all of the platforms, and I'm grateful that it came out the way that it did. I mean, and Paul actually did the mastering, and he did a wonderful job on that. And then the last piece, which is called, I have to look at the title now. I'm blanking on it now. Forgive me. It's all 6 pieces playing together at once. And he just did it as an experiment. And I think it's All in Good Time or something is the title. I should know. But it sounds amazing. And what it does, it just evokes the thought of the album. You don't really realize that it's all the pieces put together. I've never heard anybody do that. And Paul has some really cool ideas. So that was a fun one. And I remember getting the email from the guys in Poland, and they said after listening to the album for 15 seconds, he understood. He totally got the album within just that short amount of time in that first piece. So that's a great compliment. And also our peers like Mike Stern, Laney Stern, they all love the record. Mark Egan, they think it's a great record. And I'm very, very blessed that Paul and I got to do this. And what's next, I don't know, but we're going to hopefully do some live gigs and make some more great music. That's
absolutely. Is it possible why that record label in Poland as opposed to another one here in the United States? It's hard to get a record label or record deal.
It's distribution is a funny thing.
Yeah.
You'd have to do a license. I mean, I know people in the business, and Paul does too, and we'd have to find somebody here who would want to take over the physical distribution, and that's a little bit of a challenge. Not that it's impossible, and it's certainly worth investigating. I don't know what they have, so I'd have to talk to them. It's definitely possible for sure, but we have to investigate. But at least the thing it exists, and people can get it. I do know that the CD is, it's in distribution in Europe, so that's not a problem. We have a limited number now that we're going to do through Talk Shop Live, and we'll just see how it goes. I know Paul's doing a concert next month for Lyle Mays in Italy, and benefit concert, and I think he's going to hopefully get some product that he can take back. I don't know if he'll be able to do that, but I know we talked about that. So, and I do frequently go to Europe. So if there's, another trip coming up, I'll certainly, if the tariff thing is not resolved, we'll certainly go and get more product so we can, service the United States and Canada, whatever. So
because I imagine there's going to be a big demand for that album.
I hope so.
CDs and vinyl, both, and tapes or whatever people.
I've noticed
I'm a vinyl type of guy, but
vinyl will be interesting because there's a lot of people who do like vinyl. But I noticed that the digital release, at least the Spotify release, has garnered quite a few plays.
I see.
And I was listening the other day to Alexa on, I guess that's Amazon, and I asked to play some Eberhard Weber, who I'm a big fan of, and they play that and they play stuff like it, and then Tuxedo Man came up. So
pretty good.
That's really cool, and I was like, wow. So
could be. Well, in general terms, what's your take as a musician in sort of Spotify versus Bandcamp, and you need to have like 1 million hits to get a check for $10 to get a cup of coffee or something? That's a ripoff to me. But
it is.
What do you see? What's the solution for that? If all the group get together and abandon the stuff, they will go to business, right?
Well, there have been artists who have like boycotted Spotify, who have said we're not going to have our music on there. And I mean, realistically, for me, I learned that whatever source somebody uses to get your music, and this is aside from the monetary value, I think it's important. I do believe very strongly that music has a lot of value. And it's not just the song itself, it's the work we put into it. Now, there are digital platforms, like one of them I mentioned, Deezer. I've received over 500,000 streams on Deezer with Gravitationally Bound, the song. And now that's a lot, you know. Now, if I compare the amount of income to Spotify, it's enormously a lot, you know, in comparison. So there are platforms that do pay better. I think it's incumbent upon us as musicians and the musical community to band together to encourage the powers that be that music has value and should be treated that way. And that's all we can do. It's hard because a lot of younger musicians don't have that attitude. They kind of give their music away, and I say, like, why would you do that? You know, I've produced a lot of younger guys who made some really nice music, and I said, you know, you should go out and sell it. No, I gave it away. It's like, why did you do that? If you can sell it, you have to take the attitude that it has a value, and people will pay $5 for a Starbucks coffee, so they'll pay whatever for that piece of music. Yeah. If you stop doing that, then that hurts all of us. Yeah, but I do feel like the competition of those different formats is important, and there are many available now, and you just have to kind of see what happens in the future. But I am optimistic about the value of music, because I see that when I do concerts and I bring CDs or people want to get the recording. You know, you can't sign a digital download. You know,
that's right. Yeah.
So,
you know, nowadays people like me and thousands of other after gig want to take a picture with you for some a sign this or teacher or whatever, and it's merchandise. It's a good percentage of the tour. You know,
absolutely, sure, it is.
You can pay for the trip, you can pay for the hotel, or whatever. You know,
yeah,
you need to take advantage of that. You know,
it has the tours that we had done in the past 15 years, and even more, have been supported by the CD sales that we had, especially in Europe, you know, and in South America, and even in the States. You know, we would go out and, you know, you would sell. I remember doing a tour with the David Becker Tribune and Spyro Gyra together in Germany in the 90s, and we did about 15 cities all over Europe. And I've known the Spyro Gyra guys for years. They were friends during the MCA days. And so I was working with a promoter, Carsten Janke, in Germany, and he put us on his label, and we toured with them. And for some reason, Spyro Gyra were not able to get product for the tour. So we were the only ones at the merchandising table at the end of the night. And we would sell boxes of CDs. You know, we played with, 1,500 people, and there would be like hundreds of people, you know, wanting our records. We would, you know, and that was great. I remember they were kind of frustrated, but it was sort of like the political thing with the label not being able to get the CDs, which was dumb, but, you know. So
absolutely. No, absolutely. No, of course, merchandise is important. Of course, feel free to elaborate on the album Living Argentina, you know, for 2007. Of course, I'm from Chile, so it's when I saw a particular album, I thought I need to ask this guy. Feel free to elaborate on what the album came about. And
well, so I did my first tour of Argentina in 2005. I had recorded The Color of Sound with Joe DiOrio, the great guitar player who was my mentor and my dearest friend. And when I went down to Argentina to do a duo project with a guitarist from Cordoba, Daniel Corso, who's still active down in Argentina, we did a really big tour, and Joe had just had a stroke. So there were the album just got released, so there were a lot of things going through my mind. I'd never been to South America. I'd been to Mexico, and going to Argentina was like, wow, this is really cool. And we played all over the country. We played in Patagonia, we played in Cordoba, we played all these different, in Buenos Aires, we played in La Plata. And, you know, there were so many experiences that I lived through that when I left to go back to Germany where I was living, it took me 3 days to get home. And so as I was leaving Argentina, I was just sort of going through what I'd gone through. And actually the song on the album Leaving Argentina, Racing Through the Andes, is a true story. Because we played at Patagonia in Rio Gallegos, And we had to get from there to Buenos Aires and then go to La Plata for me to do a workshop at a guy who became a very dear friend, Waldo, at his school. And if I missed that, I wouldn't be able to do it. So the airline had us on the late flight, and we were trying to get to, get out of Rio Gallegos, so that they finally said, we can take you to El Calafate. I had no idea where's El Calafate. Well, Rio Gallegos is on the east coast. It's on the tip of Argentina. And you know where El Calafate is. It borders Chile.
That's right.
And so we had to drive with this guy from the cultural department who was going 1,000,000 miles an hour on these really, really snowy roads in the Andes. And I literally thought I was going to die. I thought, that's it. We're going to crash and that's it. And eventually we got to the top and things got okay. And we saw, Lake Argentina, and we saw, this incredible, glacier. And then we finally got there, and I managed to get to the gig. And there's a picture of me at the school, just completely disheveled, but it was a 12-hour day, but I ended up doing the workshop, and it was all good. So a lot of those stories stuck with me, and I also heard a lot of tango music, which I really, really dug. Yeah. And so I wrote a tango in honor of Astor Piazzolla, who I was a big fan of, and we actually recorded the bandoneon down in La Plata. And so a lot of the elements of that tour were in that album, Leaving Argentina.
It's good for you, man. I noticed when I was checking out your biography that you have released several books and DVDs as well.
Yes.
Good for you.
I've done. The first book that I wrote is probably the most successful as far as it's the one that keeps selling. It's called Getting Your Improvising into Shape, and it's available through Mel Bay, and it talks about triads and how triads work with playing lines and chords, and how it's the fundamental of our musical system. And I've done several after that. I've done, I did one for True Fire. I've done numerous things for the All Guitar Network, which is an offshoot of Norman's Rare Guitars in California. And I've done, I think, 3 books for Peter Fingers. They're DVDs and books. And then I did a book during the pandemic myself, which is called Etudes You Can Use, and that you can get off my website. So everything is, if you go to my website, davidbeckertribune.com, you can get links to all of the music, you can get links to all of the educational material. And I post all the interviews that I do, so this will be up as well. So
thank you very much. Looking back in your life, you have played with so many people in venues all over the world. Is anybody in particular you wish you have had the opportunity to play with, or?
That's a good question. I mean, I've been lucky to play with some of the greatest musicians in the world. I do. There's one guy who I wished I had gotten to play with. I got to know him a little bit. Is Chick Corea, because the very first gig that I did, that was one of the biggest gigs, was opening for Chick Corea and Miles Davis at the Long Beach Jazz Festival. So now you have to imagine it was Jack DeJohnette's special edition with Rufus Reid, and then it was Steps Ahead with Michael Brecker and Chuck Loeb and Peter Erskine, and then it was me solo, and then it was Chick Corea's trio with Dave Weckl and John Patitucci, their debut, and then it was Miles Davis with Schofield. And I mean, I played for 30 minutes for this sea of people, but it went really well. And I remember meeting Chick after my set, and Chick was very complimentary, and we had a great talk. And so years later, I was at the North Sea Festival, and I was hanging out, and I know Frank Gambale, and Frank was playing with Chick. So I'm walking around, and there's Chick, and I walk over to Chick, and I said, hey, I don't know if you remember me, but no. He goes, I remember that because Miles was there, and yeah, tell me more. I'm like, wow. He goes, what have you been doing? And I said, well, this, and this. And he goes, wow, that's great. He goes, and I said, I'd love to play sometime. And Chick goes, we should do that. That would be great. And so, you get busy, and then, of course, he passed away.
Sure.
And that was so that was an opportunity that I wished I had. But I'm satisfied that I've been able to do what I've been able to do, and who knows what's on the horizon. Something is on the horizon. You know, you never know what's. I mean, I got to play with Ron Carter and work with him, which is something was a huge highlight, and became friends with him. And so you never know what's around the corner. You can't. You know, I don't want to regret that I didn't play with Chick, but if there had to be one specific incident, I think that would be the one. So
Yeah, yeah. And what are you working nowadays? Is there anything in particular you're working that you could tell? You can elaborate a little bit?
well, I just I've been doing the Planets project, so that I keep that active. I'm looking forward to playing with Paul
Yeah,
next year, in some capacity, doing
yeah,
some gigs,
yeah.
and just I have the Batavia project as an orchestral thing, 50-piece orchestra, and I talked about doing a recording of the main piece with an orchestra in Mexico City. Now that sort of fell through again, but it's on my plan to do sooner than later. So that's one thing to look for, and just making sure like your catalog of music is like your kids. Like I don't have any children of my own. I have two stepdaughters who are wonderful, Ashley and Amber. But my catalog of music is important to me. So I've really taken a lot of time this year to make sure that everything is available, that everything is there, and to sort of, check up on it occasionally. And so that's been a big
Good
part
for
of
you,
it as
man.
well. So that's,
Good for you,
yeah,
man.
yeah.
Hey, David, I know we've been talking for more than an hour, and I'm quite sure we'll do a part two of this. And then thanks again for your time.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
The album Tuxedo Man is very, very good. It's like I told Paul the other day, it's like a layer with many, like a
Yeah.
cake with many layers, right? And
You-
I have listened to the album like 6 times, and
Yes.
every time I discover something different
It's
that
same
I
for me.
never paid attention, right? So it's a
Same
great
for me.
album.
There's so many elements in that record.
Absolutely, man. Yeah,
You can listen to it intensely or you can listen to it in the background, but there's always something that'll pull you in. And to get a
absolutely.
record like that, it's like the musical things just aligned up. But I honestly believe what it was Paul and I had such a great connection hanging out and talking that we just basically went and extended that with our instruments.
Yep. Yeah. And Paul mentioned that you guys went to the studio on Saturday, I think by 5 o'clock. I think we got a
Yeah,
record. Yeah, let's
it was
get a record.
done.
Well, let's pack everything into the car and let's go to dinner. And
Yeah, we had dinner, we had pizza, and then I drove home. I drove 3.5 hours down to Springfield. So,
my God,
and I didn't listen to anything
that's right. Yeah.
until we got some of the rough mixes. But I
Yeah.
had this feel in my head that we had done
Good for
something.
you.
So,
Yeah. Then again, it was very nice talking to you, David. Let me know if for Mayena is anything else I can do to help you guys to
It's
promote
my
the
pleasure.
album, the record.
I
interview,
appreciate
everything.
that. I
No
appreciate
problem.
that.
Take it easy, man.
Thank,
Thank you very
take
much.
care. Okay.
You too.